129 million. 129 million. That's the number of additional cases of major depression since COVID-19 began. 1/3 of U.S. adults reported symptoms of anxiety and depression in 2020. It's been most severe on young people. The government closing of schools has been the greatest mental health tragedy ever. It's been the most severe disruption of education in history. 1.6 of what they were prior to COVID in terms of attendance. And on top of COVID, we have the difficulties of normal life, right? Of living in a broken world, dealing with broken people, including broken people being ourselves. And on top of all that, you want more on top of that? Like a third icing on the cake? We don't need it, but it's there anyway. If you're a follower of Jesus, you can expect regular spiritual attack against you from the forces of evil. Because Paul tells us in Ephesians, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers, against the authorities, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. We are facing a pandemic of fear and discouragement. How many of you are, there's fear and discouragement. How many of you are more affected by fear than you are by discouragement? Let's take a poll. Who's more affected by fear than discouragement? Okay. Who's more affected by discouragement than fear? I put my hand up on that one. They always seem to go together, fear and discouragement. How many have not been affected by fear or discouragement at all in your life? Raise your hand. Good. Everyone here is a human being. I'm glad to see that. Okay? No avatars or anything like that in the congregation today. But today I want to give you 3 actions to take to overcome fear and discouragement in your life. 3 actions. And it's from this story about Jehoshaphat. Action number 1 is to turn to God and listen. Turn to God and listen. Action number 2 is to remember God's promise to fight the battle. Remember God's promise to fight the battle. And number 3 is to show up and stand firm. To show up and stand firm. Now, fearful situations and discouraging situations will happen wherever you go. They happen to everybody on the planet, including people who follow Jesus. And in the Bible, it happens to one of the greatest leaders in the Bible, a godly leader, King Jehoshaphat. Now, most people have not heard of him. He doesn't get the credit that is his due, like King David or one of the apostles, but he was a godly man. He followed the ways of his father Asa and did not stray from them. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And yet he was fearful and discouraged. So he's reading verse 12 through the beginning of verse. We don't know what to do. But our eyes are on you, God. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on this man, Jahaziel. He stood up. In verse 15, this is what he says. He says, "Listen, King Jehoshaphat, and all you who live in Judah and Jerusalem, this is what the Lord says to you." And this message is what God is saying to you today, to me today. So action number 1 is turn to God. There's a fearful or discouraging situation in your life. Action number 1 is turn to God and listen. Turn to God and listen. Let me give you a little bit more of the background. Some people came to Jehoshaphat, who was the king, and this is in chapter 20, verse 2, and they said, "A vast army is coming against you. From Edom, from the other side of the Dead Sea, and it's already in Hazon Tamar, that is, En-Gedi. So it was a huge army, more than they could handle, coming against them. Does anyone know what armies did in those days when they attacked another peoples? No mercy. What did they do with pregnant women? They would rip them open with a sword. What would they do with all the houses and everything? The fields, the trees, burn them all down.